Bliss.io.
Hey folks, here I am with my pal Phil to discuss all matters cultural, elegant, and learned. And today's topic is horror comics. We all love them, we all read them, but let's face facts. Comics are the worst medium for horror there are. That doesn't stop us from producing them. In fact, Phil and I are producing a new comic right now called Axicab, which you may have heard of. And right now, fans have got Bronze Star 2 in their hands, which is a supernatural Western that delves deeply into horror. The latest issue features the Wendigo, a legend popular to all Northwest American Indian tribes. And we're working on the third issue too. Horror comics go back to EC Comics, which were named Educational Comics because there was a switch and fake out but in fact they were highly educational. And those horror comics in the days of yore, like crime suspense stories, was it horror? Well, when you look at the stories themselves and the circumstances and what happens to those people that err on the wrong side of morality, you bet they were horror, because those people ended up in some of the most horrible circumstances imaginable. In fact, that was a major inspiration for the book we're doing now, Axicab. The comics were so violent without being graphic that they spawned a violent reaction from the government, spurred by the guy that wrote Seduction of the Innocent, Dr. Frederick Wortham. He was a psychologist at the time and said, these comics are ruining our youth's minds by putting insidious ideas into their heads. And this has recurred over and over again throughout our history. It happened at the birth of rock and roll. Remember when rock and roll was the devil's music? Don't let your kids listen to rock and roll.
Don't show Elvis's hips.
Yeah, same thing with horror comics. And it caused the creation of the Comics Code Authority, which ruled for many years until finally people just got fed up and said, this is ridiculous. The people that are reading comics are not children. I mean, there are some kids who read comics. They like Archie. They like Bugs Bunny. They like comics like that. I don't think there's any Bugs Bunny around anymore, but there used to be Uncle Scrooge, Donald Duck. But the comics that young people were reading starting in the 60s and 70s were Marvel and DC, especially Marvel, which took a much harder edged view of the superhero universe, which occasionally verged into horror. But horror comics have been with us the whole time. Especially with the dawn of underground comics. If you look at the work of CRoM or Robert Williams, you have to admire their courage in being completely uncensored. I admire Robert CRoM more than any other underground cartoonist for letting his id run free. And some of the things he do were beyond horrible. But that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about traditional horror, which usually involves monsters.
You know, it's funny. You mentioned that horror traditionally involves monsters, but you also mentioned earlier that horror can be the crime. It's horrific, grotesque. And that's what I love about the horror genre in general. It's all over the place, you know. You don't just have to have the monster books. You can just have, like Axicab, there's no traditional monster. It's just a horrific human who kills other horrific humans, you know. And it's a horror book, you know. Now, some of my all-time favorites, growing up, I was obsessed with Swamp Thing.
Yes.
I loved the Swamp Thing. And, you know, I'm right in that perfect age where, you know, I was prime of my comic book reading was in that Alan Moore era. And Alan Moore took it to a new level. He really did. And then another one that was one of my favorite series was Weird War.
Yes.
Which I considered horror. Because it was just creepy, weird stuff that made you think. leading up to the Creature Commandos. I love the Creature Commandos, a commando strike force of monsters, including their good friend, the GI Robot. But I loved Weird War. And then one other that I was obsessed with as a kid was House of Mystery. And what I like about the horror genre, and this isn't across the board, but for the most part, a lot of the horror series are anthologies. You buy an issue, you read a couple of creepy stories or one creepy story, and then you put it down, and next month another creepy story or three comes out. And then you also had, then Weird War. The Weird War was like that really from the beginning until the Creature Commandos really came on the scene, and then they had that commando team, and they were still standalone stories. But and that's one of the things I like about the horror genre is that anthology. So somebody has a crazy, weird, interesting idea, they could find a book for it to go in and adapt it, whether it's Abel telling the story or the Crypt Keeper or, whoever. That anthology concept behind a lot of the classic horror is one of my favorite things about the genre.
Didn't Warren revive the black and white horror comic with Creepy?
Creepy, and I think they started with number 2, didn't they? They had
They
like
have.
a maggot, like they had like a ash can type, low printed, version of number 1, and then when they made it into a proper magazine, it was number 2. If I'm correct.
And it was hosted by Uncle Creepy.
Uncle Creepy.
And that's where a lot of the great horror artists, including guys like Bernie Wrightson and Wally Wood, got their start. And believe it or not, Jim Warren is still alive. He's in his 90s.
Wow.
Yeah, I interviewed him once.
Bernie Wrightson in the horror genre is one of my icons,
Yes.
Because, not only did they have the horror stories, but he had such intricate line work. It's like whether you liked horror or not, you were going to want to look at that book. And then you started reading the stories and you're like, dude, you're hooked.
Yeah, I started picking it up because I flipped through it and I saw his art and it just knocked me on my ass. He's one of those guys where you look at the page and you think, this guy's such a terrific artist. I'm going to buy everything he produces. I'll worry about the story later. It's a bonus if you enjoy the story. And Len Wein came up with some good concepts. Of course, Bernie Wrightson carried on in the tradition of Graham Engels, but he took it to the nth degree. And today, Kelly Jones is his rightful successor, inspired by the art of Bernie Wrightson and taking it even further. And I always admire that because there are certain artists in popular culture you think these guys are the greatest ever, like the Beach Boys. But there are a whole bunch of bands that have been inspired by the Beach Boys that have surpassed them, in my opinion. But we're not here to talk about power pop, although I would love to. We're here to talk about the horror comics. Now, the thing about the horror comic is it's just a comic. You're holding it in your hand. You turn the page and there's a horrific image. And then mom says, dinner's ready. And you fold that comic up and set it aside, which makes it not the best medium for horror, because the best medium for horror is cinema, because they control the timing, the sound, and the lighting. And you don't know how important that is until it hits you blam in the face, like with The Exorcist. We were talking about that the other day.
Yeah.
And the voice of Regan, the child, when she starts speaking in the devil's voice, it sent a chill down my spine. And of course, they control the timing and the lighting, which is so important, the images.
Yeah, it's hard to get a jump scare in comic book because your eye does wander. You're looking ahead sometimes. You've seen a panel as you turn the page. So unless it's truly on the next page, that's the only way to get a jump scare in a comic book. And it's not truly a jump scare where you're like, oh my gosh, it's just like, whoa, where'd that truck come from, because you didn't expect what was going to be on the next page, but you don't get the true jump scare. One thing I love about the comic book genre, especially during the 70s and 80s, is that most parents just thought, hey, they're fine for kids, right? It's a comic book, it's fine for kids. So when I was a little kid, I don't know, I think I was possibly like less than 10 years old. They used to sell Golden Records book and record sets. That was a comic book with a 45 record, and it would read the comic book to you with sound effects and actors' voices and things like that. And they would do the basics. You know, they would do Amazing Spider-Man #1. That was the first reprint of Amazing Spider-Man #1 and Fantastic Four #1. But they somehow did the Man-Thing, and I think it's issue 7. And it's basically about a clown who goes into the swamp. Or he was bullied all of his life, the strong man at the carnival. He was in love with this girl, and the strong man beat him up, you know, and he goes down into the swamp to kill himself. And so I'm sitting there as a little kid with my book and record, and you see this clown put a gun to his head, and as you turn the page, it's like, bam! And then the dead clown's laying there on the bank of the swamps.
Wow.
And I mean, it's like heavy duty for a little kid. It's like hard to believe that got approved to just, hey, we're going to put this right next to Superman and Batman book and records from Golden Records. But it really shaped my love for the horror genre. And that's why I like pretty much any comic book with the word thing in it. You know, Man-Thing, Swamp Thing, The Thing. Yeah. Giant size Man-Thing, which is a nice little innuendo.
I know.
But versus it was, dude, there actually is a comic book that is giant size Man-Thing versus the Glob. You know, it's like, oh my gosh, dude, what were they getting away with? Especially with the Comics Code Authority. But yeah, that issue, I think it's Man-Thing #7. That was the clown. If you haven't read that book, go buy it, go read it online, find a way to read it. Because imagine little kids picking that up on the newsstand, and then, you know, on the cover, Man-Thing's carrying a dead clown, so it's not like it was hidden, you know, and it leads off the story going into why Man-Thing wreaks havoc on this carnies. So anyway, I love the horror genre. I mean, it's the surprises that you get in horror, because most superhero books rarely have surprises.
Now I want to read it. You know, the image of Bernie Wrightson's werewolf in Swamp Thing remains with me to this day. It's probably the finest rendering of a werewolf in a comic I've ever seen, which is saying quite a bit, because there have been many werewolves in the comics over the years. I'm going to show an image file from a great artist. I'm trying to think of his name. You know, if I can't think of his name, I can't find the image. So never mind.
Kind of hard to search. Hey, I need the artist. And it gives you 6,000 people.
Right.
So did you, Mike, when you were a kid or as a teenager or even as an adult, did you read a lot of the EC books?
Yes. Yeah. In fact, I have a hardbound collection in the basement.
The artwork was fantastic. And the stories were, some of them were horrific, you know, and it, you know, I just love that genre. And that's why, you know, the EC books are worth so much money. It's, you know, comic books are, you know, a lot of parents burned them, you know, when The Seduction of the Innocent, a lot of the comics were destroyed. You know, it's like, you can't read that garbage, it's going to turn you into a criminal, you know. And so, you know, they're hard to find, and when people have them, they don't want to get rid of them, because they are classic comics, and it's part of the key part of comic book history and how it evolved, like it did with The Seduction of the Innocent.
The name I was trying to think of was Reed Crandall. Hang on here.
Reed Crandall.
Yeah. Do I have it? Yes. There it is. Pops, can you throw that up? Can you eat it first? Well, we'll see. Maybe I can do it. Nope. Well, anyhow, he'll be back, and we'll show you the cover of this werewolf comic in a minute.
Yeah.
Uh, but
And I mean, it's funny talking about horror kind of stretching. Another series I really liked was, I think it was GI Combat, The Haunted Tank. Do you remember that?
yes, I do.
And so, you know, I love the war books. Growing up, I loved Sergeant Rock. I love The Unknown Soldier. And then when they bust out the Haunted Tank, I'm like, what? You know? And so it's really fun once you get into the horror, even dipping their toe into the horror genre. It opens up so many opportunities to tell really cool stories, in my opinion.
I wrote Dead Man for DC for a number of years. And the thing about Dead Man was, up until then, he had been treated like uh, a superhero, which was a mistake. I think Neil Adams created him. But when I took over the book, I was talking to Paul, the editor, and I said, well, I'm excited about this, but I don't think he's a superhero. And Paul said, think of him as a horror hero. And that's when I got the idea.
That's great, because your Dead Man run was, you know, I love it when you get on a book. You know, you did that with Dead Man. You did that with Flash, you know, where you take what everybody expects and then you twist it on them, and they don't know what hit them when they read it, you know?
That just came naturally to me. I don't know why.
You're just a disruptive gentleman. That's what it is.
No, I want to be original. You know, I was after reading comics for so many years, you get used to certain phrases over and over again. You say, I'm not going to use that phrase because everybody else is using it. And I'll give you 3 examples. I don't think we're in Kansas anymore. Move it, people, and we have to talk. And you know that line, we have to talk. I hear that on TV all the time too.
I hear it at home. So, you know, it brings a little trauma to me. So I don't ever want to hear we have to talk. No, I'm just kidding.
I sympathize.
When your parents said we have to talk, or a girlfriend or a spouse said we have to talk, that is horror. That is a different type of horror.
Yeah, but anyhow, moving on to horror comics. They got squeezed out by the Comics Code Authority, but then they came back. And Warren, of course, he created Creepy, but he also created Vampirella.
Mm-hmm.
It was a stroke of genius because she's the precursor to so many late night hosts that we're familiar with, and Morticia and so many others. But
Elvira, Mistress of the Dark.
Yes. Vampirella was a horror book, but it had a twist, had a sexy twist, because your hostess was the mostest.
With the most uncomfortable costume in comic history.
That's right. So who's putting out horror comics today, aside from us?
You know, DC did a series a few years ago that I really liked. And I don't buy a lot of new books because I don't want to read the same thing over and over again.
Yep.
But I really liked this one. It was called The Nice House on the Lake. Have you heard of it?
No.
It was a 12-issue miniseries, and I'm not going to really give anything away on this, but the concept is this guy who's a mysterious guy has a group of friends that he's made over the years, some college friends, some friends after college, you know, and he invites all of his, there you go, crack comics. That's
Well, I forgot about that. But anyhow, we're just to keep talking, try
a little werewolf. So Nice House on the Lake, he invites all of his friends to his lake house. And while they're at this lake house, the world comes to an end. Every city in the world just starts blowing up, and aliens are attacking and monsters are attacking these cities. But they're protected in a bubble, and they're the only ones not being killed. And it was a 12-issue miniseries that I really liked, and it was more sci-fi horror, suspenseful horror, but very creepy. And I thought it was very well done. But that's a modern one, and that was from DC. Yeah,
What you
and then
just
there's this
described
comic
is,
called Bronze Star.
oh yeah, Bronze Star. Wait, let me throw that up too, in case people aren't familiar with it. Bronze Star is a book I created with Pat Broderick, and it came about because I said, Pat, what do you want to draw? And he said, I want to draw a supernatural Western. And that
Quite a
got,
combo.
yeah. Um, but move from studio. All right, let me see. And Pat's Wendigo is the most frightening Wendigo I have ever seen in my life. I'll show it to you. At
The
least, I
artwork
mean,
in
in a
Bronze Star is
comic
so
book.
good.
Yeah, in a comic book. By the way, Phil, the story you just described about a group of people who are in a house and everybody else is killed by monsters or whatever is a common theme running through
Yeah,
film and TV.
it is. But it's nice when it's done in a new way, you
Yeah,
know? It's like, everybody, there's monsters throughout history in comics, but when somebody does something in a new creative way that surprises you, that's to me, great art.
absolutely. What happened to my? Oh, there it is. There's the Wendigo.
Dude, that line, his work is unbelievable on this series.
Yeah, it is. Whether people will quake in fear, I don't
Dude, your
know.
colors look great too. I mean, who was your colorist on this? Do you know off the top of your head?
I don't, but Pat hired him. He's a friend of Pat's, and it's in the book, of course.
Yeah,
The reviews have been fantastic. Everybody loves the book. I don't think anybody says I was scared so bad I was shitting in my pants because you just don't do that a comic book. You just don't.
right.
But the story is engrossing, and the monsters are horrific. And wait until you get to number 3. I've written number 3, and Pat is blazing through it, which is pretty good for a man of his age. He's 75 years old. This is the greatest work of his career. And
Well,
it's
when you
because,
love something, it's not, I would think that he's excited about this.
oh,
I
yeah,
don't know Pat personally, but it's like when you get excited and passionate about something, you just can't wait to get to it and get on it. And it shows in the artwork in 1 and 2. And this is it's a great project, but it also seems to be a passion project where he's going for the brass ring on every panel.
yeah, it's unbelievable. His black and white work is so incredible that we have to do these oversized black and white images because when you look at the black and white work, it's completely different from the colors, completely different. When you're looking at it, you're astonished at the detail. It's like some great 18th century artist.
Like those old engravers. I mean, his line. I mean, he's doing so much detail in his little hatching and different things he does even the wood on the buildings. It's like most people would phone it in. He's like every line is meaningful on that book.
Cameo.
Ah, so
All right.
I have to ask you, Mike, because we talked about EC and we talked about the Comics Code with the crime and horror books, destroying America's youth.
Yeah.
And then, they got creative with the way they were doing horror under the Comics Code Authority, especially like in my era when it was in the 80s, late 70s, early 80s, where they had to be a little more clever. And then you have them basically ditch the Comics Code Authority and anything goes again. Do you have a favorite horror comic or a horror series that you just would read again and again and again?
Um, Master Race by Bernie Krigstein. That's a story of a Nazi concentration camp commandant commandant who's recognized on the subway in New York in the late 1950s and about what happens to him. And because it's based in history and what we know, it does have a truly horrifying effect. although there's nothing in there that's going to make you jump out of your skin like a good movie will.
Was the comic book called Master Race, or was it a story in another
It
series?
was a story in another series. It was one of those EC comics, and
Okay.
it's a pioneering story because Kriegstein broke the page up. Prior to that, virtually every EC comic had 6 symmetrical panels, no changes. But Kriegstein broke that up into a series of portrait-shaped panels to show the action happening in stop motion, which had not been done before. He launched that, uh,
Wow.
and became one of the most famous comic book stories of all time. It's been reprinted in many anthologies since then. I'm sure Steranko mentions it in his History of Comics. And I have it in Les Daniels' History of Comics. It's just a seminal story.
No, I haven't read that one. I'm going to have to go back. You know, like I said earlier, for me, the one I could read over and over again is Alan Moore's Swamp Thing.
I do have to give props to Garth Ennis' Partisan. It's an oversized graphic novel about the war on the Eastern Front during World War II, about ordinary Russians forced to fight to resist the Nazis, and it is horrific. There's nothing supernatural about it. In fact, it reeks of reality on every page. But some of the images in it are not something you'd want to show a child. They are truly
Right.
horrifying. I could not put it down.
When did that come out?
It came out last year. Hang on, I'll show it to you. I got it right here.
You know we're getting serious when Mike takes off the headphones. It's go time. And while Mike's grabbing the book, I have to give another, shout out to Weird War. I love Weird War so much. While you're gone, I shouted out Weird War again.
Good.
Okay, that look. Oh,
You have to read it in a mirror.
yeah. No. Well, and what's it called?
Partisan.
Partisan. That's what I thought. It's interesting lettering, and I need new
You know what?
glasses.
When you look at it backwards, it spells Nazi trap. Holy shit. We did not expect that. But there are scenes in here, I'm not going to show them to you. You got to see it for yourself. However, it's the best graphic novel I've read in years.
That's saying a lot coming from you, Mike.
That's amazing that you can see the mirror image, and I just realized for the first time, Nazi trap.
Partisan.
Yeah,
That is interesting.
Yeah, it's supposed to be an S, but the way it's drawn, it looks like a Z, doesn't it?
It does. That is trippy. I'm going to have to check that one out.
Yeah.
So we mentioned this earlier, but like when you read horror books, do you prefer the anthology or do you like an arc like I, Vampire, where House of Mystery did the whole I, Vampire series, where you had, an arc about this character?
I like an epic story. I think you can do more in an epic story, but you can certainly do a lot in a short story too. That's one thing about Axicab is we're basing it on the old EC crime horror comics, and they managed to squeeze a lot of story into 8 pages, and you can if you know what you're doing.
And you do. I mean, we like issue 1. They're finishing up the art on it for the new 5-issue miniseries, and it's like a roller coaster because you wrote it a while back. We turned it over to the artist, and he's starting to deliver more pages. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I forgot that we did that. Oh my gosh, I forgot we did that. So it's kind of fun for me to get surprised as every page arrives, and I forgot how much you packed into that issue.
You're very kind. We've showed this to you 1,000 times before. Let us show it to you again. Oh, there we go. There it is.
And, I have to say it was an honor to sit at the table with you at the Antarctic Press booth at San Diego, signing Axicab posters and Axicab. I mean, you're a legend. I am not. I'm a one-trick pony at this point with Axicab, but I think it's a really good trick, that this pony can do. But the people that came by to get copies signed. I mean, we had the new director of Attack of the Killer Tomatoes. We had one of a friend of mine who is a fan of the comic, but he was an animator on 2 of the Spider-Man movies, and I think Battlestar Galactica, and then even Athena Finger, Bill Finger's granddaughter, came by and gave us some love. And it was just really an honor to be there, and you being there with me, because what you're doing on AxiCab is studly, and and I cannot wait for this to come out.
Thank you, Philip. You're a polymath.
This cover is by Billy Tan. One of the things, I have a lot of friends, and Billy Tan is one of my favorite modern comic artists. He doesn't get as much credit as he deserves in today's industry, because he doesn't do work in the United States anymore. He does comic books in Asia, but he worked for Top Cow and did Tomb Raider and Witchblade, and then went on to Marvel and did X-23, was his first Marvel book, which is one of my favorite modern miniseries, Wolverine's clone daughter. And then he did, New Avengers, Secret Invasion, went on to DC, did a massive run on Green Lantern, and then he moved to do books in Asia. And he's a friend, and he goes, Philip, I'm going to do a variant cover for AxiCab. And he backed the Kickstarter for the first one shot. And then I just get this package in the mail with this artwork, and I'm just like, oh my gosh, Billy, you're unbelievable. And the colors are by Lee Duig, who is Guru Effects. He does a ton of Marvel books, Wolverine, Deadpool, all the big books for Marvel, but he colored that for us. And that's going to be the variant cover for your #1, Mike. So it was really fun to work with you at San Diego, signing those posters for people.
Thanks, Phil. And that cover is horrific. I mean, there's no gore or anything there, but you got your monster, and it is disturbing.
And I love it, because the concept of the cab driver is he is an evil, he's an evil person, but he also kills people he thinks are evil, and most of society thinks are evil.
They
but
are.
On the cover, the thing I love about it the most is he's run over some poor victim, and he's getting out of the car to admire his handiwork, and the joy on his face, I think, is what makes it the creepiest, because he's got this massive grin, and his hands he's just proud of himself. And then you see the hand with broken fingers and dripping blood and rain splattering on it, and a glimmer off the watch from the headlight. And I think it makes that an insanely iconic cover.
It does. I have to point out that story is not included in the book. It's not included in any book. It's a standalone image, but it's certainly
a variant. Variants do that. You can get away with that on the variant.
Yeah.
But on the main cover, it has to tie in my opinion. I know in modern comics they do a lot of variants that have nothing to do with the book, but I tend to like a cover that tells you what you're buying. They say you can't read a book by its cover. I like my covers to actually tell part of the story, but that's on the cover A. But cover B is anything goes, because we did not do a RoboCop tribute in issue 1, but we had a RoboCop tribute variant. So, have some fun with the variants. In fact, Bob Burden is still being peer pressured to do AxiCab variant, and he said, Philip, the only way I'll do it is if I can kill the driver.
Maybe he could do an alternate universe action.
Parrot does stuff. Yeah, that's what we'll do. But I said, dude, we'll do whatever you want as long as you do a cover for me. I need it. I need a Bob Burden cover, and I would like Flaming Carrot to be on it.
Yeah, say hello to Bob for me, and say hello to Bill. I see him walking around in the background.
Bill is here. Bill, Mike says hello. He's yelling hi, Mike, to you. We're here at the comic shop, so Bill's up in the front taking one for the team.
Here he comes. Look out, look out.
Bill.
Hey, buddy.
Hey, Bill.
Great to see you, man. Have me on the show sometime. I'd be happy to be on.
Good to know. We'll see.
Bill's trying to steal my spot as co-host.
I'm not.
What if Phil disappears Sunday and Bill pops up and says, Phil can't make it, I'm taking his place. And then you're never seen again.
It could happen.
And then I'm the Axie cab driver. Just kidding. Just kidding.
It's a tough crowd.
All right. Well, I got to go feed these dogs.
Thank you. It's been a good show. It's always fun to talk about horror and pop culture and comics with you, Mike. And I appreciate you having me on as your co-host.
Thanks, Phil. Next week.
See you next week.
All right.
Hey, what's up? This is Kel Mitchell, and you are watching Madness Entertainment Group. Woo!
It's a place to celebrate heroes that have passed. A place to remember great deeds and past battles. And the place where evil now waits to strike. Galaxy Memorial Park, Volume 2. Crowdfunding on fundmycomic.com.
I'll tell you, I'm at Steel City Comic Con. You're watching me at Madness Comic Network. What a crowd. Love it.
Ozzy, what are you doing? Come and have a look at this lovely book that was sent over.
You're wrapping in the burning.
Oh, go on and spit the bat out your mouth. No one can understand you like that.
Say how to 5 dentists and all.
Oh, well, that's not much better. Ozzy, why don't you sing to me? I can always understand you when you sing to me.
Fucking my brains. What is this my publisher sent me? Inked in black with art so sweet.
So what do you think? Do you like it?
Oh, Lord, yeah.
I don't know why, but you are watching the Madness Comic Network. Are you mental?
If you missed the live viewing of any Meg production, you can find all our content on Roku or as a member of this channel